Hashtag Foodie Beauty. Something tells me that she wasn't 100% truthful to her mental health doctor, because if she was, she would see another side of Chantal, the one YouTube sees. The blasphemy, racist, bigotry, and hateful side. Had she been truthful, the therapist would have diagnosed her.
Therapist was very on point, you know, just by little things I would tell her about my story, like recent story, sort of the past few years. She talked about grief, grieving things that I still haven't really grieved. Parts of me who I was. Not necessarily a bad thing, grieving, but sometimes when there's change, whether it's good or bad, you grieve parts of things that are changing.
Grieve parts.
Like recent story, sort of the past few years. She talked about grief, grieving things that I still haven't really grieved. Parts of me who I was. Not necessarily a bad thing, grieving, but sometimes when there's change, whether it's good or bad, you grieve parts of things that are changing. But it was nice to have my feelings validated, especially since I don't know anybody really who understands me wanting to go back to Kuwait. But this therapist did. And she gave me a lot of reasons why I would want to go back there based on what I told her. And my feelings were validated. And they also came up with a lot of resources for me to have access to healthcare remotely. There's some binge eating program resources, addiction services, and the adult mental health program, which is like covered by OHIP. It's like a 1.5 year wait. So for like one-on-one counseling. So we'll just see. I have some resources. They also suggested help me pick out resources in Kuwait. So the focus is to also have access to some resources there, which there are community centers, but they're Islamic, so they made a good point that a lot of it's probably going to be through a religious perspective, which makes sense. And, being a revert, they suggested finding other revert expat groups that might be support. So they also started, I told them, socializing. I isolate a lot because socializing, getting out there is kind of overwhelming when I'm feeling, down. So they suggested
Therapists don't diagnose, only doctors can do that. And therapists are used to clients lying to them or showing only the best side. It takes time to build trust in a client-therapist relationship. Correct. A therapist does not diagnose, especially within one session. Even if they did, a psychiatrist would be the one to do this. Therapists do and can diagnose. Yep, I'm sure she mentioned her dead grandma, said abusive relationship I got out of a couple of times, then rambled about her handsome, loving husband back in Kuwait. No actual facts about her life really at this point were given. I'm sure she left out a lot of the YouTube drama she caused herself and the endless ranting and raging. Yeah, but a therapist can see through that pretty quick. Handsome, loving husband would raise a lot of red flags for any trained therapist. No woman in an actual stable relationship would overcompensate in her description of her husband like that. She's so confident when she says revert. Has no one told her it's convert? I think for Muslims, they use that term revert when you change from one religion to the next. The two terms are used interchangeably. She calls herself a revert because she feels she was born Muslim. In Islam, everyone is born Muslim, so if you turn to the religion later in life, you are reverting to your original religion. No therapist would diagnose a patient on a first visit. How would she get all of that in a 45-minute session? You all got a BFFR. It's too bad no one can tip that mental health professional off with her channel details. Could you imagine? She would probably be a case study used for students and a whole write-up in some academic journal. It would actually be really interesting. Why didn't she schedule another appointment? Makes me think this was just for the visa. She had to get an evaluation the first time she went to Kuwait. She went in and got a consultation. She got no therapy. She has a single introductory appointment, so validated. Hashtag Foodie Beauty. She mentions that she didn't mourn in the right manner when it came to giving. She never mourned the passing of her grandma. The only time she displayed grief was when rejected her, BBJ was rescued. Her grief seems self-absorbed.
Parts of me who I was. Not necessarily a bad thing, grieving, but sometimes when there's change, whether it's good or bad, you grieve parts of things that are changing.
She mourned by running to the trap house with N to smoke crack and giving N her grandma blanket. I think she has the dark triad with borderline features. She's self-centered, she doesn't care about other people, and she doesn't have any morals. Hashtag Foodie Beauty thinks that she can easily obtain a driver's license in Kuwait, but it's not that easy. She can obtain a temporary ID called Anistimara, which is good for 60 days. She has to have a full medical report updated. And then, link included on how driving license is earned in Kuwait.
Yeah, I love this color. So, it keeps my water cold when I'm out driving around the whole time. By the way, I can easily get an international driver's license or driver's license over there in Kuwait, but it's not the same as driving here. No, I don't really enjoy driving over there, so I'm gonna be a passenger princess when I'm there.
What kind of therapist advises a client they just met to leave the country and go halfway across the world where her healthcare options are limited and her chronic diseases are not under control? Hashtag Foodie Beauty. How could they refer her to services in Kuwait? Maybe she was talking to Dr. Google. She said there's a year and a half wait for one-on-one counseling, so no telling who she was chatting with. But definitely not a qualified psychiatrist. Not one. She didn't see a therapist. She never has. She won't because a therapist would hold her accountable. She can't spell therapist. She sat in a Burger King's parking lot, stuffing her face to make her family think she went to the appointment. I want to know how a therapist that she just met happened to know that there were community centers in Kuwait where she could get religious-based therapy when he had no idea who she was or that she even lived there before today. Religious-based therapy sounds like a cult. Agreed. I don't for 1 minute believe she went to any therapy appointment. Phil probably had her at some life coach guru, a therapist who wasn't informed of the chronic diseases and only thinks obesity is a primary issue of the new client. Rule 1. They don't. They all have ethical and professional codes of practice they work under, and whatever level of therapist they are, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc., they are bound under those codes to prevent harm as an outcome of sessions, including physical. One who hasn't been told the full story. Definitely one that graduated last in his or her class. And on the verge of war. I think they probably wanted to get rid of her. She needs a higher level of care than one every 2 years therapy session. Don't forget rule number 1. She lies. I don't believe her. A made-up one. Lol. Simple. Rule number 1. A non-existent quack. All she does is lie. One who saw through her BS so fast they wanted her on the other side of the globe. A really crappy one. If Chantal even went, she probably lied to the therapist. She probably also wants a therapist to just yes her to death. One that should lose their license, that's why it's BS. No therapist would ever tell someone that leaving the country is a good idea. She didn't go, and if she did, she lied out her ass. She needs years of therapy, diagnosis, medications, and then some. She will never, ever, ever be happy until she gets that help. Chantal is full of crap. Only her brain-dead VIBs believe that. No way that happened.